This video is a primer for teachers on using the cooperative learning method called Jigsaw in your English language learning class. The Jigsaw method was invented in Texas by Professor Elliot Aronson and his grad students as they searched for a cooperative learning method to reduce bullying in elementary schools. For more information on the history and research around the method, visit Professor Aronson's website, jigsaw.org. Today we'll be looking at the Jigsaw in the English language learning classroom. For more information, visit esljigsaws.com. If you've done group work before, you may be somewhat skeptical of the value, having watched as higher students dominated and lower students never opened their mouths. The Jigsaw breaks this traditional paradigm, as higher students are forced to rely on lower students for information, just as the reverse is true. The individual and group accountability built into the Jigsaw leads to greater bonding among classmates and helps break down barriers between different language groups in the classroom. These lessons are truly student-centered as the teacher takes on the role of facilitator, monitor, and coach. There are 3 stages to a Jigsaw activity. Stage 1 is where expert groups learn 1/4 of the story. In this stage, each member of the group has the same text. Stage 2 is where heterogeneous groups teach each other the section of text they've learned. Stage 3 is where students work cooperatively on follow-up activities. You'll notice in this visual representation of a 16-student class that groups are color-coded. This makes for a much more seamless transition as students move from their expert groups into their mixed groups, easily finding who they're meant to be working with. Whether you do it the same day or the day before, the first job for the teacher is to pre-teach the vocabulary from the story. An alternative would be to give the vocabulary for homework. For higher level classes, part of their stage 1 work could be to look up all the vocabulary words in their section of text and define them using simple English explanations they think their classmates will follow. But while this sounds wonderfully student-directed, understanding the vocabulary is key to the Jigsaw activity working, so this may only be suitable for higher level classes. Stage 1 is where all the students in a group have the same section of text. They spend 5 or 10 or 15 minutes together, depending on the class and the text chosen, to learn that part. Jigsaws are often divided into 4 parts. So what can you do if you don't have multiples of 4 in your classroom? What if you only have 15 students? The most obvious solution would be for you, the teacher, to take a role. This is the least advisable strategy because you're needed for the roles of facilitator, monitor, and coach. Let's talk about some different ways to handle uneven numbers. Another strategy is to have one, let's call him or her, high energy student, tell his or her part to 2 different groups. Just as this student has finished telling his part and you see him start to tip his chair back in a potentially dangerous way, you swoop in and remind him that he's needed in the other group. Another alternative is to divide one section into 2 and give these shorter parts to lower level students. Those students will stay together throughout the lesson. This is a great way to deal with a multi-level class where you have some students who might be unable to memorize the length of text the rest of the class can handle. Alternatively, you could put 2 lower students together to learn one part. This is a great way to deal with a new student not yet familiar with your classroom routines. He or she will be there in a helping role to provide assistance in case the partner forgets anything, a much lower stress activity. In some multi-level classrooms, you're faced with having some students who are at a much higher level and want more of a challenge. This is a great opportunity to give them that challenge by having them learn 2 parts instead of 1. The key will be having them put in the time to also prepare how they will explain their part to ensure that they don't speed through, leaving lower classmates confused. As we've seen, there are a variety of ways to handle a class that doesn't have a multiple of 4, even a class that has fewer than 4 students. A very large class can work, but noise can be a factor. Remember, this is cooperative learning. Many people will be talking at once. In very large classes, teachers may wish to send some groups to other rooms to manage sound in the classroom. Now let's talk about stage 1. In a beginner or intermediate English language learning class, at this stage of the Jigsaw, the first task for students is often to memorize their passage. Memorization is optional for the Jigsaw. Let's look at some of the benefits. Memorization, just like songs, trains the ear in the syntax patterns of the language. If you have an intermediate level class, your students are likely quite capable of reproducing their text passage in their own way. It's exciting to see them instead, through memorization, reproducing the text in standard English and explaining it to classmates in their own words. The perception of students is often that they've really learned something and been challenged through the task of memorization. Memorization is a key strategy for language learning, which is developed through practice. While any level can do jigsaws, it's important to get the right level for your students. Remember, students will have to produce this text and make themselves understandable to other students, as well as listen and understand others. The most common mistake teachers make is to scan through a text and gauge whether students will be able to read and understand it. Be sure to aim for your students' listening comprehension and speaking level, not their passive reading level. Jigsaws are suitable for advanced level, but for that level, role plays instead of memorization may work better because parts can be made more complicated. Even native speakers can only retain so much, so watch how long you make your parts, even for high-level students. If you're planning on using a jigsaw with a very low level, and you're confident to have chosen a text that is appropriately suited to the student's listening comprehension and speaking ability, be sure to pre-teach the vocabulary well beforehand. In most cases with a very low level, teaching the vocabulary the same day you intend to do the jigsaw is a mistake. Jigsaws can work well at the end of a unit when students are well familiar with the vocabulary and can now work with it. Alternatively, give the jigsaw vocabulary for homework the day before. You could even give students one section of text on their way home the day before. Don't forget to work on pronunciation just before attempting the jigsaw, and where possible, support the text with clear visuals. Here's an example of some illustrations from a jigsaw on housework from the book Callan's Thematic Jigsaws. These illustrations are effective because they support the text passage as both a memory and comprehension aid, and most importantly, leave little room for misinterpretation. During Stage 1, while students learn their section of the text, you'll see a lot of peer teaching as students attempt to decipher meaning and assist each other with memorization. Peer teaching is great for lowering the affective filter, so it's worthwhile giving students the opportunity to do as much as they can on their own before stepping in. During Stage 1, the teacher circulates and checks that each student comprehends the text passage. Next, the teacher checks pronunciation and intonation to ensure others will comprehend what they're hearing. At the end of Stage 1, text passages are removed, and the teacher checks to ensure students have memorized their passages and are ready to move on and tell their part to other students. Stage 2 is mixed groups, with one expert from each section of the text. With a jigsaw based on 4 parts, each group would have a student from section A, B, C, and D. This is the listening and speaking stage. Student A begins and will clarify if any confusion arises. Ensure that students are familiar with gambits for comprehension checks before beginning a jigsaw, so that they can deal with any confusion that might occur. Stage 3 is a 4-skills stage where students make use of listening, speaking, reading, and writing as they work cooperatively on written questions related to the jigsaw. You find a lot of peer teaching going on in Stage 3. Because students have not become experts on all 4 parts, you'll find instances of lower students assisting higher students, breaking the traditional paradigm of group work. Another benefit of the jigsaw is conversation in the target language. This image shows a Level 1 class with a student from India, one from El Salvador, one from Ethiopia, and one from Lebanon, all speaking together in English. Let's talk about some other follow-up activities you could use instead of written questions and cloze exercises to check comprehension and promote cooperative learning. A crossword can elicit the same answers as written questions, but in a new format, keeping things fresh. Another option is a Jeopardy-style game using play money. This exercise from Callan's Contemporary Jigsaws creates the content questions to be answered later through a grammatical exercise on tag questions. This exercise, also from Callan's Contemporary Jigsaws, requires students to form the questions which they later answer together. Let's talk about some other ways to use the jigsaw method. For higher level classes, a newspaper article can be divided into parts. The teacher can record 4 different audio parts of a story for students to learn in a listening class. For more ideas on making jigsaws of your own, or for ready-made jigsaws, once again, visit esljigsaws.com.